Last time we looked at the overall situation surrounding the SKT cyber attack, but today we're going deeper. This time, we're putting on our hacker goggles to understand exactly how this happened, and more importantly, how it could have been stopped. Let's begin by imagining a scenario. You're not you today. You're a state-sponsored hacker working for a foreign intelligence unit. Your target? South Korea's largest telecom provider, SK Telecom. Your objective is simple, but high stakes: infiltrate the HSS, the home subscriber server. The very core of the mobile authentication system. It's the place that knows who every Korean phone user is, down to their SIM card. If you can compromise that, you can clone SIMs, eavesdrop on calls, spoof identities, and surveil people in real time. Your weapon for this mission? A piece of stealth malware called BPFDoor. It's not new, but it's legendary. It doesn't behave like traditional malware. It doesn't open a backdoor port. It doesn't scream its presence. It listens, silently, invisibly, and waits. It uses the eBPF layer in the Linux kernel to intercept traffic without ever making a sound. So how does this breach begin? First comes Reconnaissance. Think of it like a thief casing a building. But here, your building is the IDC, Internet Data Center, where SKT's critical infrastructure is housed. You don't just scan servers blindly. You use surgical tools, Nmap, Masscan, to map the exposed landscape. You look for idle IPs, leftover SSH ports, debug services that someone forgot to turn off. You're not just checking doors. You're studying the entire plumbing system of the building, every hidden duct, every forgotten vent. Once you've found a weak point, maybe a web server running outdated Apache, or a developer box with no patch in 6 months, you exploit it. Suddenly, you're in. You gain root shell, the god-level control of that machine, and now comes the real trick. You don't install ransomware. You don't launch a DDoS attack. That would be noisy. Instead, you plant BPFDoor deep inside the file system. BPFDoor integrates itself with the Linux kernel. And from that point on, it listens silently to network traffic, filtering for specially crafted packets from its command server. Only those packets will activate it. No logs, no firewall alerts. If no one's looking at the kernel-level processes, they won't even know it's there. The brilliance of BPFDoor is that it doesn't need an open port. It doesn't even create an outbound connection unless summoned. It's like a bomb hiding inside a vacuum cleaner, invisible, quiet, and devastating once triggered. Now the attacker begins lateral movement. They pivot. They scan the internal network, which is often less protected than the external perimeter, looking for more machines, more credentials, and especially the route to HSS. This is where corporate hygiene really matters. If internal services trust each other blindly, if SSH keys are reused across systems, if environment variables are misconfigured, the attacker walks through them, like unlocked doors in an office building, using techniques like ARP poisoning or DNS spoofing. They can impersonate legitimate services, harvest passwords, and jump further and further in. Eventually they reach it, the HSS. Now, the HSS isn't just any database. It's the vault of a mobile network. It contains secrets like MZ, Chi, RAND, the cryptographic ingredients that make SIM authentication work. With this information, the attacker can create cloned SIM cards. Or worse, they can simulate a user's identity and intercept their communications, all without the user knowing. In the worst case, the attacker can become you in the network. After gaining what they need, it's time to exfiltrate. But they won't send files through HTTP or FTP. Those are watched. They use covert channels, ICMP tunneling, DNS tunneling. To the network security system, it just looks like ping traffic or DNS queries. But hidden inside is raw, compressed, encrypted data, terabytes of user records smuggled out without setting off any alarms. Even more dangerously, BPFDoor can modify the kernel syscall table or hijack processes in such a way that standard monitoring tools don't see anything unusual. Think of it like a thief who doesn't use the front door or the elevator. They crawl through the ventilation shaft and vanish before morning. So, what could have stopped this? Let's rewind and overlay the defenses that should have been in place, layer by layer. First, in the pre-breach stage, eBPF should have been disabled or locked down through Linux policies. Not every server needs it. Logging access to the file that maps out kernel symbols would have flagged the attacker's intent early. Next, intrusion detection systems should have been trained to detect passive packet sniffing. BPFDoor doesn't send packets, but it opens raw sockets. That alone should have been an anomaly. Inside the internal network, zero trust should have been applied. Not every server should be allowed to SSH into another, just because it's on the same subnet. Access should be ephemeral, with authentication based on cryptographic tokens that rotate hourly, not persistent SSH keys from 2 years ago. For HSS, the vault, access should only come from TPM-backed devices, and data in transit should be end-to-end, encrypted with tamper-evident logs. If even a single query goes out of pattern, say pulling 50,000 subscriber records at 3 a.m., that should trigger an alert. And finally, on the exfiltration side, deep packet inspection of DNS and ICMP traffic should have flagged suspicious tunneling patterns, especially if the traffic is compressed or shows entropy, typical of encrypted payloads. In short, this wasn't just a hack. It was a complete operational failure at multiple levels: architecture, monitoring, privilege separation, and incident response. It shows that even the largest, most technologically sophisticated companies are vulnerable if their internal assumptions are wrong. The attacker didn't have to break down the walls. They just quietly walked through them, because no one was watching the hallways. In our next episode, we'll explore how attribution works, and why this particular attack points strongly to state-sponsored actors, possibly China, based on the signature techniques, code reuse, and infrastructure patterns. But for now, the key takeaway is this: modern attackers don't rely on brute force. They rely on architecture that trusts too easily. And defense isn't about buying one big firewall. It's about understanding your system like a language. Every syscall, every socket, every handshake. Because if you don't read your own system like a book, someone else will, and they'll rewrite the ending.